Quattro did more to further the cause of the performance car than perhaps any other. When it was launched, it wasn't just quick, it was supercar quick. A 0 to 60 of just 6.3 seconds. That made it faster than a Ferrari 308 or even a Porsche 928. And it dominated rally for years. But there's always been a question mark hanging over this four-wheel drive icon. Nobody doubts that it was fast, but some say that the actual drive was a little bit of a letdown. In this video, I want to find out if that's true. But first, a little bit of history. This was the first to use four-wheel drive for performance rather than mud plugging. Yes, the Jensen Interceptor FF got that in 1966, but that was more gentleman's express, not a true sports car. The idea was sparked off during Audi's winter testing, when their engineers noticed that the VW Iltis support vehicle was running rings around the supposed performance cars that they were there to evaluate. And that moment sparked a revolution. The green light was given and the Quattro was born. It was based on the 80 platform, but with some very clever engineering to keep development costs low. The four-wheel drive system was lifted from the Iltis. But of course, with this being a road car, it also needed a centre differential, something that VW didn't have access to. In the end, at least on the prototypes, they used one from, of all things, a VW Polo. I'm not sure if that carried through on the production versions or not. Maybe that's something that you can let me know in the comments. Now, the existing rear suspension system no longer worked with the new transmission. So what Audi did is that they took the strut front end, spun it around 180 degrees and simply put it on the rear. They took the steering rods, made them track rods, and it was done. Genius. The 2.1 litre turbo 5-cylinder was taken from the Audi 200, but with an intercooler and extra boost, the power went up from 170 to 200 horsepower. Now, on the rally cars, they shrunk the engine slightly from 2144cc to 2133cc. That's because to qualify for the 3-litre class, there is a 1.4 multiplication factor, and shrinking it just that amount made it eligible. Later versions saw even more development, and by 1989 it had grown to 2.2 litres, got 20 valves and 220 horsepower. It was mounted longitudinally, which makes it perfect to transfer power to the rear. One of the many reasons why the Quattro worked as well as it did. This one is an 87. So it has ABS as standard, they're 20mm lower, it has the single headlights and sloping grille. And the cars that came after this also came with the Torsen differential. This one still has the original locking diff. It was one of the last cars to have it. Let's take a look inside. Now, the very first cars came with an analog dash, but most of them have the LCD one like this, which is oh so incredibly 80s. One thing that is clear is that cars have come a very long way from this. So although the build quality is pretty good for the time, the plastics do feel a little bit brittle, and these are supposed to be a little bit rattly on the move. But that's not what all this is about. So let's take it out and see how it drives. Right, so apologies for the sunglasses. Now that I'm in the car, we'll take them off. But outside, I just didn't want to be squinting through that presentation all the time. Now, in the Quattro, there's a couple of things to notice here. So in the UK, any performance car of the 80s would have had a Clifford alarm. It was the top-end Thatcham approved thing, and just seeing that little LED there flashing with Clifford on it, very distinctive. There we go, and already, even from tick over, it feels distinctly different to a 4-cylinder, but also there's something else about the interior which I haven't yet told you, and we'll try and provoke it by just setting off with the seat belt not on. Can you hear that? I've just done a Maestro, which was known in the 80s for being incredible because it had a voice synthesizer, and I never realised that these cars had it too. So you have a whole raft of messages and warnings that will be spoken to you if something goes on with the car, like oil pressure, low petrol, seatbelt as you heard, all that kind of stuff. which is something else which is quite endearing and very 80s about this one. Now, as I mentioned right at the beginning, the question mark over these is that driven hard, they're not supposed to be all that great. What I can tell you so far, first impressions are that the engine is very tractable. It's just come on and warned me about the brake pads. Anyway, the engine is very tractable. Has quite a distinct personality to a 4-cylinder. Funnily enough, doesn't sound like a 6 or a 4. It is its own thing, but I'll be interested to see what it's like when we're really stretching it. At slow speeds, very easy car to drive, really comfortable. The seating position, all the controls are at hand. So yes, I can confirm that this interior is squeaky and rattly in a way that no modern Audi client would ever accept. But this is going back a long time now. 80s is what, 45 years almost? Or 40 years till this was sold and made? But, you know, the ergonomics at least are good. So it makes you feel comfortable and ready to take it through its paces. And also, the steering feels pretty well judged. But let's try and see what the 80s 200 horsepower, turbo horsepower, feels like. So that's a mixed bag, really. The 5-cylinder feels like quite a zingy, revvy unit, but the sound is pretty muted in this, so most of the time it's not something that really comes across forcefully. I think there may be that there's no point in actually revving it, so taken through the gears there, it felt slower than I expected, except when I got into 4th and the revs dropped a bit and it got into that turbo zone. So I suspect that a better way of taking it through the gears is to short shift it so that you're always in that elastic band turbo delivery. We'll try it again further on. I mean, you can tell even just from putting your foot down. So the in-gear performance is much more indicative of what I would expect from this car. Even in 4th at close to 3,000 revs, it feels like it's going to go and never stop pulling. There's a couple of things that I find quite amusing about these cars, and the first is the name, Quattro. It's such a seminal thing, but when you realise that it's not even German, it's an Italian word, I wonder why they picked it in the first place. It's quite cool sounding, and maybe that's what it is, but surely they should have gone with something German. The second thing is that it's really bizarre to think that a car which so completely rewrote the sports car rulebook came about completely by accident. Wonder how long it would have been before someone else figured it out. Right, let's see if that chassis is as flawed as some would have us believe. I've got a car in front of us, so I wasn't able to go through there quite as quickly as I wanted. We'll do it again on the way back, and we'll try and take it through the gears again. But I have to say that at brisk speeds, I can't feel I can't feel those criticisms that have been leveled at it. So the steering is really nice. It's not massively quick, but it's nicely weighed. There's loads of feel coming through as well. The gearbox isn't the most pleasant to use, but you know, selecting gears is okay. But let's see now. Maybe extend that engine properly. See if you get more of that turbo feel. So, first gear, and we're off. That's much more like it and much more impressive. So don't go all the way up to 6, it will do it, but there's absolutely no point. Change up at 5 and then you're keeping it in the elastic band turbo delivery. And now, chuck it into the tighter bends. I think 3rd gear for this will be good. The brakes are strong, put it in. Loads and loads of grip. Loads and loads of grip, But driven harder, I can kind of see where those journalists were coming from. I don't know if you saw earlier when I was showing you and talking about the engine, you can see how far towards the front of the car it is. That's not great for weight distribution. You want it all as centralized as possible so the car can pivot. Because it's over the front axle, most of the time it's something you wouldn't notice, but when you really throw it into a corner fast, which is one of the beauties of four-wheel drive, that front bias distribution, you can feel that it wants to push a little bit wide. Past the apex, it seems to gather it in a little bit, but when you're first throwing it in, you just get the impression that it wants to plow on a little bit. But having said that, it's quite a subtle thing. I think that most people owning one of these wouldn't even notice, because most of the time, driven quickly, what you notice is that it's so incredibly sure-footed. Put your foot down, it sort of drags you towards the horizon, and all the while it just feels very calm. The steering's quite precise as well, and because you're getting back so much feel, it's still a rewarding car to drive. Just maybe if you were to compare it to some of the cars that came later, say an Integrale for example, which I have owned. I didn't like that car particularly because it just felt like it was so badly built and so fragile, but I do admit that driven hard, it is more satisfying, it's more rewarding than this. It's lighter footed and it's just a little bit more composed. This is a little bit more of a blunt instrument. You can throw it around the road really fast, but it's not like, whereas the Integrale is a ballerina, this is a bit more brute force and less finesse. Still great fun though. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you will notice that I'm wearing jeans, whereas a few seconds ago I was in shorts. That's because this is now 4 weeks after the shots that you've just seen. Incredibly, the German icon broke down in the first test. To be fair, it's not the Quattro's fault, it was the fuel pump, which I assume it had since it was new. So Keith has now brought it back to me and we're just filming the end of the video. That's quite a good thing in a way, because there was a problem with the gearbox linkage when I drove it before. And I have to say, he's sorted that out now, and the gearbox, while still not being perhaps one of the most engaging, is much snappier and easier to use. Now, if you wanted to buy yourself one of these, I have some good news, because they are actually relatively good value. They hover from sort of 40 to 60,000 pounds. And that's pretty good considering a Integrale of the same sort of spec would probably be between 80 and 100, and a Cosworth, Sierra Cosworth, probably around the same. So I don't know why they have that lower price bracket, and perhaps it's because they sold more of them. I didn't actually check that. Maybe more of them have survived because being a German car, it is better built than the Italians. Or perhaps it's because of that reputation that it has, that on the limit, it's not the most engaging out of all of them. But overall, as a classic, I think it would make a fantastic purchase. Let's just get one last bit of boost before I give you my conclusion. So down to second gear. Well, it's definitely laggy, but I like that old style feel. And so, were the doubters right? Is it a disappointment to drive? And no, it isn't a disappointment to drive. I mean, what you do have to realise is that it was the first of the breed. So, some of the sports saloons like the E30 M3 or even the 190 from Mercedes, they are more engaging to drive. And the rally reps that came after this, so the Integrale, the stuff from Ford, from Toyota, yes, I mean, at the limit, certainly, they are more satisfying as drivers' cars. I mean, an Integrale in particular is quite a special thing on the limit, but the rest of the time, I found it a little bit of a disappointment. Anyway, if you're really going to the edge, there are cars that are more satisfying than this, but they did come after, so you would expect that being, developed further, they would be better. This, though, you have to keep in mind, is the one that started it all. And as such, it's an incredibly special car, and I don't think most people would be disappointed by the way it drives. Now, if you enjoyed this, you need to have a look at the history and the road test that I did on the Sierra Cosworth, a car that in character couldn't be more different to this, a real hooligan. Massive thanks to Keith for bringing it down, and of course to all of you for watching.